The Network Information Service, or NIS, utilizes daemons and a database to provide centralized authentication in a client-server architecture for Linux. This is similar to the way that Active Directory provides centralized authentication for Windows clients in a Microsoft network. Let's take this analogy a bit further. Active Directory makes it possible to create and manage user accounts, groups, and passwords in a single place, on a domain controller. Many clients can then use this server so that user accounts, groups, passwords, and permissions apply to many computers on the network. This client-server architecture, where objects only have to be created and configured once, and they apply to every computer on the network, is infinitely more manageable than peer-to-peer networks, where objects would have to be created on each computer individually. In the same way, NIS provides a means of centralized authentication on Linux networks. You only need to create, configure, and modify objects once on the NIS server. Those changes are then implemented on all of your NIS clients. You do not have to repeat them on each workstation as you would in a peer-to-peer network. Historically, NIS was formerly known as the Sun Microsystems Yellow Pages. Hence, you will see YP prefixed to many daemons and config files belonging to this service. In addition to NIS, a newer implementation of NIS exists known as NIS Plus that allows for hierarchical domains as would exist in Active Directory. Securing NIS is very important. You must carefully control access to password and configuration files through host allow, host deny, and encryption. But that is another story. Today, we are only concerned with setting the service up and getting things configured and functioning. Let's get started setting up and configuring NIS. I'll be narrating the visual portion of these tutorials as we walk through things, but for the rest of the title clips, we'll use the text-to-speech engine Julie, as she has a much greater command of the English language than I do. Yay, Julie! We're setting up NIS today. And right now I'm on an Ubuntu 10.10 server, alright?
Ubuntu comes in both a client and server image, each having a 32 and 64-bit version. All images are free downloads from Ubuntu's website, www.ubuntu.com. For the NIS server, Charles downloaded and installed the server version of Ubuntu. By default, it has no GUI like the client workstation versions. This is by design, as servers don't need to waste memory on a graphical interface, sound, or multimedia. Rather, they need their memory and CPU cycles for daemons that provide DHCP, DNS, NIS, file and printer sharing, LDAP, web, FTP, Samba NFS, and CIFs. In other words, basic server services. However, to make commands entered into the terminal more legible, Charles has installed both X Windows and the GNOME desktop in the server version of Ubuntu a la carte.
And this is two parts. We're going to do the server and the client. Now, this is a different ISO and it's a different image. As a matter of fact, when you download the server ISO, there's not even a graphical environment. There's no X Windows or desktop by default. Everything's a la carte. And you don't need those to run the server services, but in this case I've installed them to sort of give us just a graphical output so you can see what I'm doing as I go through the required processes of setting things up and installing them.
1. Install port map. Use sudo apt-get install port map.
So the first thing I want to do is install a port map. I'm going to do sudo and apt-get and install port map. And let me authenticate, get my password there. And I have a few database services, MySQL and things installed, so I'm just saying no. You might not see the exact same screen that is showing up on mine, but as long as you install port map, this is what you should see when you're done, then you're fine. So that's sort of step 1.
2. Update port map defaults. Use sudo update rcd port map defaults 10.
Alright, now the next thing we need to do is sort of update the port map defaults. And so I'm going to do sudo, and I'm going to do update rc.d and port map defaults 10. Okay, and then you can ignore the warning if you get one, but basically you just want to do that before you install NIS.
3. Install NIS. Use sudo apt-get install NIS.
And now I'm going to install NIS sudo apt-get install network information services, and it'll query or ask you for the domain. And in this case, this is going to be like your NIS domain, and you could also couple that with DNS and make it your DNS domain and everything else. But I'll stick with the same theme I've been using. So we'll do ultimatebattlestars.com, and now this will toil for a while. And the very first time you set it up, it will probably give you an error message. It could give you a failure. And the reason is you haven't added the necessary information into the configuration files yet. But to get the configuration files and to get everything set up to where you can start configuring this, you have to kind of go through this process. So, we'll just let it toil. And then when it's done, we'll go through and we'll edit the configuration files, and we'll need to restart the service, and then we'll be done. And several minutes later, I'm back after impeding my son and daughter from engaging in Mortal Kombat. That is 3 warnings, 1 6-year-old, 1 8-year-old, 4 door slams, 1 wine, a timeout, and a that's not fair later. Okay, and again, notice it failed the first time, but don't panic. Like they say in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you just need to edit the configuration files.
4. Edit / etc. default NIS. Use sudo nano / etc. default NIS.
So I want to go edit one of the main configuration files at this point, and I'm just going to do sudo nano etc defaults default and NIS. And I need to change a few things here. And since this is the first NIS server, as a matter of fact, it's the only NIS server on my little network here, I'm going to change it to a master. It's not a slave, it's a master, and it's the only one. And it is not a NIS client, so I'm going to set this to be false. It's a NIS server. And that's really the only things we need to change in this configuration file. But there are others.
5. Edit etc. ypserve.securenets. Use sudo nano etc. ypserve.securenets.
Alright, so next I want to do, I want to edit the next file. In this case, there's yp serve.securenets. So I'm going to go into etc and ypserve secure nets. And this is sort of a super duper permissive. You notice the comment here, please adjust, give access to every. I mean, for debugging purposes, I guess you could leave it like this, but it wouldn't be very secure, because remember with NIS, if you don't carefully control who has access to your NIS servers, then they can potentially download your password list. And even if it's a hashed value or an encrypted value, it doesn't matter. They can still use software to submit the hash value and try to impersonate users or get into servers. So it's not the most secure service that there is, at least if we leave it like this. So we're going to pull this out, and in this case, we're just going to set it up to be, I'm going to do 255, 255, 255, 2550. And I'm going to do 199.207.13.0. Just kind of get my little local network address here. And let's save it.
6. Edit /var /yp /makefile. Use sudo nano /var /yp /makefile.
And the next one I want to do is sudo nano, and I'm going to do I need to edit the make file, and that's in var yp. I have to change a few options here. Okay, and basically I just want to add, since by default shadow passwords are implemented in Ubuntu, I need to add a line to that effect in this configuration file before I actually compile anything or call make on it. So I'm going to go here and I'm just going to add shadow, and yep, and yep. Okay, and now that I've saved that.
7. Restart the port map daemon. Use sudo service port map restart.
I'm going to go ahead and restart port map. So sudo service port map restart. Alright, and that went fairly smoothly.
8. Restart the NIS daemon. Use sudo service NIS restart.
And now I need to do the same thing with NIS. Okay. And NIS services are stopping and starting. And again, this may take a while. And more than 60 seconds later. Alright. And this is restarted. And again, don't worry about the fill this time. But
9. Invoke /user/lib/yp/yp init-m. Use sudo nano/user/lib/yp/yp init-m.
I need to go in and do one more configuration here. And so I'm going to do sudo and user and lib and yp, and I want to do yp init-m, add a spacer, to, I need to configure, in this case I only have one NIS, a master server, so I put the hostname in, which, this machine is Pegasus, and I'm going to do Control D and Y. Bingo! And that'll set everything up, and now notice that Pegasus has been set up as a NIS master server. Okay, so we're almost done with the server, with the exception that I don't really have anything except this is a fresh install of Ubuntu server, as opposed to Maverick Meerkat client. So I don't really have many users configured or added to it yet, and you can tell if I look at my passwords here. In this case, I'll only really have the user account that I'm logging in as.
10. Add the users and groups to be used by NIS clients throughout the network to the NIS server. Use sudo user add-d/home/username-m username.
So I'm just going to make some users real quick. And to do that, I'm going to do sudo user add the -d option to make a directory first. And I'm just going to call this user1. And I'll name the user user1. I'm going to do a user2. And I'm going to do a user3. Okay. And 3. Alright. And with this done, if I look at the home folder, notice that creates a home folder with those user accounts. As I make the user accounts, it creates a home folder to go with them. And look at the permissions on those accounts. As far as the group and the owner, each of those users respectively owns, and it's the group of their directory, their home folder.
11. On your NIS server, give your new users passwords to log in and authenticate with NIS clients in your Linux network. Use sudo password username.
Okay, so I just need to give them some passwords as well. And I'm just going to do a sudo and password and user1. And for the purpose of testing, we'll make it a short, easy to guess password. Wouldn't be hard to brute force that. PASS. But our purpose is to set up NIS and not to create hardened accounts. Alright, so we have passwords for these user accounts, and I'm going to go back to my home folder, and I'm just going to cat the password file in Etsy. And if I cat the password file, notice that here are these user accounts. So they exist now along with C Germany. And in this case, my password here is password.
12. Compile your new users, groups and passwords into the NIS database. Use 1 cd/var/yp/2 sudo make.
And then whenever I add users with a NIS server, the only thing is when I'm done, I'm gonna have to I need to rebuild the database or update the database. So when I'm done modifying user information and things like that, I would just go into the var yp directory. Again, I'll print working directory, and I just want to run the utility make. Okay. And actually, let me do that with root privileges. So I'll do sudo make. Okay, and that'll just update the database for exporting. And I'll go back to my home folder. Alright, and basically we're done with the server portion. So now it's time to move on to the client.
13. You can test it. Use YPCAT password.